Welcome again to another episode of the Wolfsburg Connect podcast. On this episode today, we have Mayor Lombardo from the city of Pittston. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And today I want to talk with you a little bit about what we were just discussing before we started recording, sort of the revitalization projects and some of the things that you've been doing in the city of Pittston. But from the aspect with being here at LEAD and the idea of advocacy of how can people get involved and engage their government when they see things that they would like to improve and different things. Like you just talked about the new theater that's going to be coming into Pittston. How do those things get started and how can people get involved?
Well, I think first of all, the first thing is to have people involved is there needs to be an awareness of what actually is happening. Mm-hmm. So communication on our part as elected officials, I think, is essential in that pathway. You know, we recognized over the last couple of years, I think we all can agree that we live in a time where we have all the tools to communicate better, but somehow or another we're just not doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So about 2 years ago, I was out in the neighborhood walking around. We do this thing called the Neighborhood Action Team where we go out into the neighborhoods and we look at, things that need to be improved. And it's meant to be a positive,
Gotcha.
Curative thing, not a punitive thing.
Mm-hmm.
We give warnings and we say, hey, do you need help? So I'm telling you this story for a reason. I had a resident that came out to me and we were talking about seniors and senior housing. And she was essentially saying to me, my home is getting to be a little bit too much. I want to stay in the city, but I don't want to get too far from where I live. So I said, you should check out this facility we built called Steeple View. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a 4.5-story building. It's one of the larger buildings in the city.
Gotcha.
It was all over the press, and she looked at me like I had two heads, like she had never heard of that thing. And I literally said to her, turn around a second. You see that red and gray thing right over the rooftops there? That's Steeple View. Oh, so I walked away from that thinking, like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible with, we think because of Facebook and Instagram and all those things and newspapers and radio and TV that everybody knows. Well, they don't.
Yeah.
So what we did, and again, I think this is an important point, instead of just saying, okay, well, there's some reason, we identified an issue and we created a response to it.
Yeah.
And our response to it was that we created this quarterly newspaper called Pittston Matters.
Okay.
That we just actually are distributing today and Monday our third edition.
Okay,
and the
cool.
idea of the Matters is it goes out just to our residents, our public works employees, put it on everybody's porch.
Okay.
And it essentially is a message from myself and each of the departments that hopefully will allow us to sort of mitigate those uncertainties.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that in a world where we are so connected that you end up having to revert back to almost direct mail to get the word out. How hard of a decision was that to sort of say, we should probably go backwards now?
It wasn't really a hard decision because I think backwards was sort of forward, if that makes any sense. One of the things that I figured was maybe they just don't know where to go. Maybe they're not looking at the city website. Maybe they're not looking at the Downtown Pittston Partnership website.
Right.
So in going backwards, we're sort of, we're back to the future.
Yeah.
We spell those things out in there and say if you need any information. And the other thing is we use technology. I think we can agree most people have smartphones now.
Right.
So we have QR codes in there that easily, if you don't want to type the www dot whatever in, you can hit the QR code and move forward.
That's amazing. So I want to take a step backwards and what kicked off the impetus for this revitalization? I moved here. I'm a transplant, so I moved here in fall of 2018. And so Pittston for me every day is different. I don't know old Pittston, and so it's always been changing in the 15 years that I've been here. So what sort of kicked this off? Where did this start?
Well, you sort of answered the question. I do know old Pittston. I grew up in it. My childhood years, my formative years, and my adolescent years were really spent with a really strong connect to the downtown. And for me, it came to this point of awakening where someone made a statement to me back in 1996 or 5. It might have been 4. And I'd been living in the city.
Yeah.
And this concept of the collective unconscious. We do things. We drive to work. We say to ourselves, wait, did I stop at that stop? How did I get here? Sometimes we go on autopilot. And on Saturday we start driving to work. I don't know who wants to do that because I don't. But we do that, right? So my brother-in-law said to me one weekend, he had lived away since college.
Okay.
He came back and he was sort of targeted coming back. And what I mean by that is come into the airport or he'd drive in and he'd go straight to his folks' home.
Yeah.
And he'd spend most of the weekend there. They might go out to dinner, usually not because my mother-in-law liked to cook. And they didn't go out. So he was downtown one weekend and said, basically, what has happened? Like, how did it? And I was insulted by that. I thought, oh, here we go again, And I love my brother-in-law, but we got somebody that moved out of the area, and all of a sudden now we're not any good anymore.
Yeah.
So to be fair, because I know the kind of person he is, the next morning I got up, and I was at that point running every day. I walked Main Street, and when I got back to my house, I realized that what he had said was actually a misrepresentation. He was actually more positive than it really was.
Oh, wow.
And I had realized that all this time, all I was doing is I was coming home from work, I was going to the bank, I was going to the post office, I was going to wherever, and it was like, it was that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking up, I wasn't looking around. And when I did that, I had this stark realization that, wow, what happened here?
Yeah.
So I started to ask myself that, and I started to ask other people that, and I started to sort of get these people around that sort of felt the same way as me, and that was really the genesis of me sort of eventually running for mayor, but also the genesis of this plan. And the plan is really a reconciliation of two things, or three things. It's sort of the way it was, that we all sort of speak about the good old days, the way it is right at the moment in this assessment of where we are in this present time. And then the third piece is the expectation of where do you want to go.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's the advice I would give everybody. I always mention music. I'm a big music fan. There's a George Harrison song where he says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, right? So you got to have a road map to where you're going. The other thing about the road map is that it's really your report card.
Okay.
So I had a professor in college that said, what gets measured gets done. Everything you do needs to have a identifiable metric with it that allows you to come back and say, okay, did I hit the mark? Did I not hit the mark? What were the outcomes? Because sometimes you get sort of unanticipated outcomes. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're not so good. So I really believe in that whole have a plan, develop the plan, let the plan be somewhat fluid, but work to it. And the beauty of that plan is that it allows you then to go with your partners, be it the county, the state, and the federal government, and say, we, as part of our plan, have identified the need for infrastructure. We need help with that.
Very, very cool. And I like that sort of three-prong approach of what it was, what it is today, but then, and it's been a common theme in the podcast from Lead today, is that what it will be, the future, and sort of looking down the line. As someone who lives in a region that's very, very multicultural, very diverse and different as far as mindsets and how people operate, how do you meld those three together? Because our future is going to look very different than our past in the region, and so there can be some sort of conflict and controversy every now and then. How do you, in a city that's thriving and really rooted in the past but looking forward, how do you manage that?
But I think, and I don't mean this to be disagreeable and argumentative, but it is somewhat. I believe that it's not really that different.
Okay.
The past was, there was a time in the city of Pittston when, if it was predominantly Irish at that point, they said, what the hell are these Italians doing coming here, and what are the Poles doing? And if you don't believe that to be true, go and just look at the Catholic church structure in the city of Pittston. You've got like 7 or 8 different churches because the Sicilians and the rest of the Italians couldn't get along. The two factions of the Irish clan couldn't get along. So this is a story that we know.
Right.
And it's why I really have a problem with, I think we need to be careful not to expunge and wipe away too much history, because in history we see the mistakes that we've made, and we've really got to look at those mistakes, and we've got to be analytical about them. So we've already charted that course once. Like, it's about open dialogue. I do this leadership presentation, and I have a piece that I call the Baptist survival. And I'll tell you what that is, if you'll indulge me for a second. I was asked to speak, and I'm a Catholic, so I was asked to speak at a Baptist church. And I was very nervous about it because I was speaking during the Mass. Well, in the Catholic Church, you don't do that. There's a playbook. If you're speaking, you're reading what's in front of you, and do not deviate from that, because some nun will come and kick your butt, right? In the old days. So I was used to that, and I was so anxious going into that. And I'll make no bones about it. It was the Baptist church in the city. It's Pastor Breeze, who I love. It's just, when you say, where are the answers are right there.
Yeah.
So I get to this Mass, and I have this perfect, safe, like, when I get up and it's my time, this is what I'm going to do. And I never do that. Like, I am a fly by the seat of your pants guy. Like,
Gotcha.
if you sent me the questions to this podcast, I wouldn't have read them because it ruins the flow. And you know, we have a guest in the room with us that I did a podcast with, and he will tell you I said the same thing. I don't like that. It ruins sort of my sort of way I get there. So I get to this mass, and 15 minutes into the mass, I realized, man, there's a lot of stuff that's like the same. This isn't that different. So that's the answer. Like, let's stop worrying about what's different. Let's you and I agree on the same things. Now, if we're in a basket of 10, maybe it's only 4.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, then I only need 2 more to go, and we're at the majority, right?
Yeah.
And that's the approach. And we're too quick to be polarized. And you know what? I said it in the previous session. I blame our leadership for that. You know, wearing heavy tags that say I'm an R or I'm a D or I'm a... Come on, like, let's just be for the people. And let's have conversations, because when you talk about the politics of us and them, the people that get and suffer from that is everybody. It's not the us and the thems, because everybody's part of that. So I believe that. I don't think it's that hard. I think the solutions are easy. I think we just need to talk better.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it's one of the things that in other work that I do, there's a story from a documentary that we did, was recorded a while ago, where someone shared that exact same sentiment, that when the coal mines very early on, you had to speak a little bit of Russian, you had to speak a little bit of Lithuanian, you had to speak a little bit of Irish, because everyone coming here was coming from somewhere else. And so that we did do this already. We were sort of a multicultural region and sort of forgotten that, but we've done it already. So I love that you say that it's already there. The answer is in history. We've done this once. Let's sort of just talk to one another and move ourselves forward.
Yeah, it's just like the whole language thing. I mean, everyone wants to get bent out of shape. Like, or, you know, we're putting, speak English or get out of our, that's like the dumbest thing to say. I mean, if we said that 200 years ago, we'd be a little, I don't know, we'd be Connecticut maybe. Not to pick on Connecticut, but that's where we'd be. And I truly believe that. So it's like, you know, I say this to my Hispanic friends, you know, I'm sorry, but when kids go to school, they're going to learn English, and we're going to learn English, and I don't know a lick of Italian.
Right.
I don't. It's unfortunate, but I don't, because that's what happens. And I'm not saying that we should eradicate that, because I believe that the strength in who we can be comes from the strength of who we are and who we were.
Yeah.
So I don't want to forget those things, but I also don't want to, you know what, like, let me ask you a question. Do you like magic? Do you like David Copperfield? Yeah. Do you really think he makes the Statue of Liberty disappear?
Right.
No, but he makes it look like it. And see, unfortunately, we are engaged in politics now that are sleight of hand.
Gotcha.
Hey, look at this over here, and I'm screwing you with this hand. That's no good for anybody, and I have a problem with that. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. If that's your stance, you're going to have a problem with me.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I want the real stuff. And look, I'm not running for any other office. I will finish my political career as mayor, however long that comes to be. I'm finishing term 4, I'm running again. I don't want to be anything else but that.
Yeah.
So this is not a great political speech, although it might sound that way. The reality is, it's reality. It's the way it is. It's the way I was brought up. And you know, my dad, 2 of my dad's best friends, one of them happened to be Jewish, was at the house all the time, and the other person was Stan Hamilton, who was very involved, you know, in cultural and you know, and sort of black integration into the North. So I never saw that. So when I went away to school, this was no change for me. Like, I was around it all the time, and you know, my dad would kick me in the butt, or any one of us, for us, you know, making a derogatory comment, and that's the way I was brought up. So I never saw those things.
Yeah.
So you gotta like get the environmental things that prejudice, you know, all the things that happen, they exist only when there's an environment that fuels them.
Right.
If you take the fuel away, it's just like a real fire. It doesn't burn. You take oxygen away, there's no fire. So I believe that. That sounds flowery and simple, but flowery and simple is really the easiest way to get there.
No, and I appreciate you sharing that. And so for the youth who will hear this or see this, how do they get involved? And how do they, if they hear, oh wait, it is just about connecting, it is just about communicating, that's how we move ourselves forward, how do they then, whether it's Pittston or anywhere else in the region, how should they go about getting involved in an impactful way?
Well, I'll say 2 things. First of all, step back for a second and ask yourself, what's important to me? Because the easiest way to get involved is to do something you like. But the second part of my answer is, don't limit yourself to that, because if you don't try things, you don't really know if you don't like. I don't like people that say, I don't like this, and I say to them, well, have you ever tried it? Like, how can you say you don't like rap music if you've never listened to it?
Right.
So expose yourself to all the possibilities out there, and then be able to have, I don't think you'd be mad at me if I had a discussion with you and I could back up why I don't like something.
Right.
I don't like lemons because they're sour,
Right.
I actually do like lemons, but maybe because I'm sour a little. But I think that's the approach.
Yeah.
So find something you care about. That will give you enough fuel to at least engage. Don't try to run at some global thing that just sounds good. Find something that it's right in here, it's in your heart. That's how I became mayor. It was in my heart. It was something I cared about.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to do anything else, because I don't really care to be governor, or don't really care to be president, or the senator, or whatever the other crazy jobs that exist in the political world are out there.
No, I appreciate that. So switching gears then, what's next for Pittston? How is Pittston moving forward? How is Pittston enhancing the region? What should we expect to see?
Well, I think we'll continue on the track that we're on. We will continue to do things in what I call our central business district and our main core. Now we're expanding that. So, we have an issue in that there's a finiteness to our city. There's no place that I can point to 100 acres of woods, nor would I really recommend that you cut down 100 acres of woods for progress,
Right.
because I believe there's a balance. So what we will do is continue to grow in the footprint we're in. We will continue to, our development scheme now has become much more vertical. In the beginning, it was very linear. It was looking at Main Street this way. But I want to say this. There's a realization that, one of the attacks that gets levied against me, there aren't a lot, I don't think, or maybe I've just become better at not listening to them, is that all I care about is the downtown. That's not the truth. See, the downtown is, it's our most valuable real estate that has been underperforming for a century, since industry left. I'm not going to sit around and yoink and complain about coal being gone. I'm going to learn from that lesson, which means I'm not going to advocate for creating an economy downtown that's driven by one sole source.
Right.
I'm going to talk about diversity and how do we make our economy diverse downtown. So those are the things we're going to continue to do. And it's weird because as the downtown builds up, the demand for certain things, like if you have 5 people in town, it's not likely that a dry cleaner is going to work, right? Because there's not a high demand. Maybe only one of the people, maybe none of them want the dry cleaner. But once you achieve critical mass, then you can start to build those things. So we pay very much attention to metrics and measurement to drive what we do. We have general plans. And I would say this, that the plan is, for me, it's always been, because my background is psychology, and I believe in incremental achievement. So you have some short-term, easy, attainable things. What those things do is they demonstrate to you, as one of my constituents, these people can be successful.
Right.
And then I have some more things in the middle there that are sort of the practical, the have to do things, right? That, we need to make sure we collect garbage. We need to make sure that when you call the ambulance, it gets there as fast as it can. Same thing with the fire department. We need people to feel safe. We need to be a clean downtown. So we're doing those things. And then there's those, and I spend a lot of my time in this delusional loftiness. There's all these expectations out there of all the dreamy things. You got to balance those with, I may have an 80-year-old resident who he or she is making hard decisions on what bills to pay. I want to be careful not to scare them with a $50 million project that they immediately step back and say, whoa, is that going to come back out of my pocket? So you got to know the team you're playing against and what the expectations are, so that you can anticipate those answers. I loved Game of Thrones when it was on, and there was this great commentary that was given by, I think the guy's name was Littlefinger, that he talked about fighting all these battles in your head everywhere. Anticipate this happening and that happening. It's 3-dimensional chess. So if you do that, what the possibilities are out there. I shouldn't have to come here with notes. I should be thoughtful enough that the questions you ask me aren't going to be like, you're not going to ask me whether I like the Minnesota Vikings. You might, but that's a straight answer. I know that. You're going to ask me more things that relate. So I think being prepared and understanding what people want in our city, and I know they want first and foremost to feel safe and to have the basic responsibilities. It's easy. It's roads, it's rubbish, and it's real estate taxes. If you can deal with those 3 things, the 3 R's of municipal government, then I think the other things, if you can deal with those 3 things and you can satisfy the expectation at I don't want to say just acceptable, because we need to be better than
Yeah.
that level, then you can do the other things. And you can then have the confidence of the constituents to have them think, well, okay, I'm not as worried, because look, this mayor and this administration has a 15-year track record of no tax increases. They don't do that by just loosely spending money. They do that by being considerate of consequences. And I will add to that and brag for a second that in the last several years, the city of Pittston has been able to achieve an investment-grade credit rating. One, we were originally told by Moody's that we were too small to be rated, but they gave us an opportunity to present our case, and we did, and we got rated. That has had huge implications. In the last session, I talked about our sewer debt, which is our largest number. On a 12-year, 13-year period, we are saving $2 million now because we are an investment-grade credit rated
Oh, wow.
municipality. So we were able to go out, and instead of borrowing conventionally like you and I do to get a car or a house, now we can go out and go to bond and go to some public financing. So we're paying attention to all those things, and as much as I like the wow and those things, we're taking care of the basics. You need to take care of the basics. It's like football. What do they tell you? The key is the line, right, on both sides of the ball, and that's what it is for us.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. This has been an amazing conversation, and good luck to you in Pittston and all you do.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.